So this morning I woke up and I looked out the window here in Kyiv and I can see the whole skyline. And I saw something I've never seen before in the capital here. And that was a total energy blackout. Not a single light in a single window across the entire city. I turned on the taps, nothing came out, turned on the lights, nothing was coming on. And I checked the news and the mayor said 600,000 new civilians now have no electricity. And this genuinely feels like the darkest winter I have ever seen in Ukraine, especially here in Kyiv. If you look at these satellite images, these were taken at the darkest days of 2023 by NASA. You can still see Kyiv, you can still see Kharkiv, a little bit of Odessa. Now, genuinely, if you took those photos again, I don't think you'd see a single blink on the map. It would be totally black. And obviously that doesn't mean the city isn't functioning at all. You can hear cars behind, you can see people walking behind me. People are still going to work. The city is basically now functioning entirely on generators. That's basically what's keeping the city running. And those generators are great. They keep businesses running, they keep offices running, they keep cafes running, but they don't keep major plants running, they don't keep pumping stations running. So Kyiv has a massive problem right now, and repairing the energy stations isn't possible. They're being bombed basically on a nightly basis now. The workers would be hit by drones throughout the night. So rebuilding these stations isn't going to work. So the government have had to think of something drastically different. And I just read some recent reports, and it looks like 20 new mini power stations that are surrounded by concrete bunkers, some of them totally underground, but all in secret locations. And some of these are first of their kind in the world, never seen before. And what's interesting is the reason that things were so centralized before the war was because of a Soviet-era heating system. And the way it works is really interesting. Thermal plants pump boiling water into massive pipes that run under this city, and they go into everybody's radiators. And that's it. They go on and they go off whenever the government flick and turn off that switch. And that was a Soviet system to try and control the population. And across Russia, that system still exists. But now, because of Russian terrorism and because of these Russian attacks, this country is moving further away from that Soviet system. And on the topic of Russia, things are actually going pretty badly on their side of the fence. And that's because in recent weeks, especially recent days, this country has launched massive drone and missile attacks inside of Russia, overwhelming its air defense systems and wiping out airfields, energy systems, oil pumps, and the heart of the Russian economy. And this is something that's causing great concern for Putin. This country started out producing 30 Neptune missiles every single month. Now they're upping that to 50, and they're going to be upping that to probably 100 sometime soon. And this is really important because after the full-scale invasion, Russia's economy shifted to a war economy, fully militarized. And what is being hit right now is Russia's military sites. It's its surface-to-air defense systems, it's its ships, it's its ports, and it's its manufacturing sites. And that's basically all Russia has right now to keep its economy going. Right now, consumer spending is down. Industrial production is down. The day-to-day living standards of Russians is declining. And don't just take my word for it. If you read Russian newspapers, they're warning civilians that they're going to have to start returning to drinking Soviet-era coffee that tastes like shit.
Soon, Russians will go back to the kind of cheap coffee substitutes from Soviet times. For example, chicory or a coffee drink made out of rye.
This stuff is the worst thing you can possibly drink when you wake up in the morning. It tastes like burnt toast and regret. But what hasn't been talked about that much is the strikes on the two tankers in the last couple of days. These are tankers that have left Russian ports carrying Russian goods. And a lot of stuff that leaves Russian ports right now, ports like Sevastopol, is stolen grain, stolen from Kherson, from Zaporizhia. And these ships, they add to the shadow fleet, they bypass EU waters, and they sell to foreign countries. And it fuels the war machine. If those ships start getting hit, those ships are going to be impossible to insure. Those ships are going to be very hard to get captains to want to sail them. Captains who don't want to have their crew having to jump into the sea while the boats are on fire. And that could make Russian logistics, Russian exports, an absolute nightmare. So Ukraine is hitting Russia exactly where it needs to. So things are going terribly in Russia right now. It's a shitty situation, especially if you're a civilian and you have to have a cup of coffee in the morning. But that doesn't mean that Russia isn't winning on the battlefield. I've just come back from the Donbas, and I've been going there for 3 years. And this was probably one of the bleakest reports I think I've ever made. And I'm still putting it together right now. I've got 4 terabytes of footage, tons of interviews. But it's the first time I've spoken to soldiers in uniform who have genuinely said to me that they believe that Russia can fully take that region, at least in a year's time. And there's a genuine feeling of worry in that region. And that's because Russia is throwing every single thing they have at getting the Donbas right now. And I know everyone's focused on places like Pokrovsk right now, and the situation there is terrible. But there's also places like Siversk, a town that I visited in 2023, That was probably one of the most stable parts of the front line in the Donbas for the last 3 years, where almost nothing has moved. And now, in the last few days, it looks like the Russians have actually entered that city. And again, that was one of the most stable areas of the front line. And that's because Russians are pushing not just in places like Pokrovsk that are getting all this attention, but in villages and towns all across the front line. And that's what's causing nightmares, because this country doesn't have the same manpower that Russia does. And that's exactly why Ukraine is pushing as hard as it can with these long-range strikes. This is the best move that this country has. But speaking of manpower, it's very, very hard to know what Russia actually has in its reserves. A recent report shows a potential collapse in the prisoner to frontline pipeline. It looks like 8 prisoners escaped and ran into some forests after killing their guard because they'd rather risk their chances of escape than death on the front line, which is exactly what they'll face. Of the 180,000 that have been pulled out of prisons, most of them have died in Bakhmut and places like Andriivka. And word is spread throughout the prison systems. And now no one in the prisons wants to sign up. Because basically the way it worked before was prisoners were given a get out of jail free card. You go to the front line for a few months, you sign a contract, maybe you'll be an engineer, and then you'll be back home to your family. And basically every single one of them dies on the front line. So now prisoners are refusing. And recent prisoners that have been captured by the Ukrainians have admitted the only reason they agreed to sign the contracts was because of a new tactic employed by the Russian guards. And that's to basically go to prisoners that say have 6 months, 12 months left on their sentence and add something on and say there's a new crime that they've been convicted of and they're going to be in jail for another 10, 20 years unless they sign the contracts. Or they get their water limited to 3 liters a week. So they're basically being coerced into signing and being pushed to the front because Russia is getting desperate. And again, this isn't a video where I say Russia's going to collapse. I've never said Russia is going to collapse. Russia is happy to take its entire country and all of its civilians back into not just the Soviet days, but the Stone Age until he gets Ukraine. Putin promised his people, and Putin promised the people that got him into power, this country. And if he fails in doing that, he'll have to explain to his entire population and everyone around him that 4 years of misery, 4 years of economic collapse, of over 1 million deaths, was all for nothing. And that would be his legacy, and that would be his demise. So he's not going to stop, and he's going to keep this going, because this is literally all he has. I hope you found this video interesting and informative. I am currently editing this Donbas documentary right now. It's going to be one of the longest and most comprehensive that I've ever done, and that's why I've been away for the last couple of weeks. There's also another reason, and that's 5 days ago I got married here in the capital in Kyiv, and it was beautiful. John Sweeney was here, Paul Conroy, friends and family came and visited, Sean Pinner was here, and it was a moment of light in all of this darkness, a moment to remember to celebrate love just by everything that's happening. So that's also why I took a little break. But again, if you want to see the full Donbas documentary, then hit subscribe, and also please leave a comment on this video. I love reading feedback. I love reading your comments. It also really helps the algorithm because a lot of people don't seem to know exactly what's going on here in Ukraine. And if you want to boost the video and get it into other people's news feeds, then leave a comment, hit like, hit subscribe, and I will see you in a couple of days. Thank you so much.